For your safety, access to Toronto Pier.
If you are using your passport, kindly have it open and over your mask when you are boarding for identification purposes only. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm back here at the airport and I'm going to Montreal today, and yes, before you ask, I am wearing the same clothes as last time. I'm poor, leave me alone. Anyways, like I said, we're going to Montreal today, about a 1-hour flight, pretty short, but this plane is supposed to be supposedly interesting. I'm not exactly sure what to expect, but let's check it out. Today's flight will be on the comfortably familiar route from Toronto to Montreal, a 15-minute hop between Canada's two most populous cities. Back at the airport, I'll be departing out of Terminal 1 as it's the home of all of Air Canada's operations at Pearson. And the plane that I'm taking today, well, it's this little guy. From the outside, it might unassumingly look like any other A319. There's really no indication otherwise beyond the subtle Jetz stencil below the regular Air Canada branding. However, the interior is a slightly different story, for this 20-year-old A319 is actually a charter plane from AC's in-house private charter company, the aforementioned Jetz. And that's Jetz with a Z because Z is the correct way to pronounce this letter in English. Okay, now that all the Americans have left, there are 3 of these quote-unquote private A319s in operation, carrying everything and everyone from diplomatic delegations to professional sports teams such as the Montreal Canadiens, Toronto Raptors. The list goes on, I think. So then, you're probably wondering to yourself as to how I managed to get on this flight. Well, back in June, they were using these planes in mainline operations for short hops between Montreal, Ottawa, and Toronto. I was late for my earlier flight in the morning, and as a result, the concierge kindly rebooked me on this flight. I had my camera with me, so here we are. When it was time to board, there were no announcements or anything, they just called my name. And only my name. Well, I'm the first aboard, apparently I'm also the last aboard. This will be interesting. Hi, good morning. How are you? Is it okay if I take pictures? All right, thank you so much. Wow. As it turns out, the only other passengers on board were commuting pilots, cabin crew, and some maintenance people. The number of paying passengers was 1, just me, which is really cool. As you can probably tell, the plane itself features all business class seating. In a 2-2 configuration, there are only 58 seats as opposed to the 120 on the regular versions of this aircraft. On my flight, the deadheading AC employees all sat in the first 2 rows. Actually, come to think of it, they might have been avoiding me. Whatever the case, it did mean that I had 26 rows of seats to myself. And normally at this point in the video is usually when I'll give you a seat tour, but with 52 to choose from, I really didn't know where to start. Thankfully, one of the lovely flight attendants suggested that I check out rows 11 and 12, which, on both sides of the plane, features face-to-face seating with a full-size table in between them. This is eventually where I sat for the flight, but let's actually come back to it later. Instead, I'll show you 9 Foxtrot, which is a more typical seat on this plane. They're not the newest seats, but they are still incredibly spacious. The seatback is home only to the literature pocket as the IFE is delivered through the Wi-Fi, and foot space is somewhat impeded by this box. Moving on to the console between the 2 seats, which is really showing its age now with how difficult it is to extend the freaking side flaps. There we go. Okay, glossing over the functionless antique media controls, the highlight of the seat would have to be the proper full-size cup holders. I wish more airplane seats had these. A little storage nook down here, and not too much else going on in the center console apart from the universal power outlets out front here. And over on this side, you have the mechanized motorized seat controls. We'll have a closer look at these later, but first let's take a peek inside the armrest, which is quite possibly ground zero for the coronavirus given how filthy it is, and it's also home to a tray table that I can only describe as being quite flaccid and sticky. Well, I'm sure we've all been there before, but seriously, this particular table wasn't very well supported. However, while some surfaces were sticky, and despite appearances, it did mean that everything was meticulously sprayed and cleaned, the whole plane smelled like a hospital. When it comes to the recline, in 2 words, I can describe it as very aggressive. Some aggressive reclining. Although it does go back surprisingly far, and you can definitely get very comfortable in it. There's also a leg rest that comes up. Personally, I love these things as it gives my legs a rest from supporting my fat ass. Everything is automatic, and that includes an adjustment for the lumbar support, which again is very aggressive. It feels like someone's kicking you in the back. Another interesting thing I noticed are the headrests. They do adjust and rise to support your head, but also in doing so they make a peculiar squishy and crunchy noise. Don't know if you can hear this. That is a weird noise to have. Okay. Lastly, the overhead panel had individual air nozzles, but is otherwise very standard. If you're a professional athlete and you've broken your leg during a game and now it's in a cast, then row 7 is the way to go. These emergency exit rows probably weren't designed with that in mind, but that's the only practical use case I can think of for them. Row 10 has limited recline as it is back to back with row 11, the latter does not have any recline. So then row 10 is possibly home to the least desirable seats on the aircraft. For whatever reason, row 12 also does not recline, despite having ample room to do so behind it. As the tables between rows 11 and 12 are latched for takeoff, we'll come back and have a closer look at these later. The cabin crew on these Jetz flights are made up of Air Canada main fleet flight attendants who have undergone a rigorous selection process, interviews, and special training in order to serve the more urbane clientele who frequent these planes, of whom I am definitely not one, so the crew were noticeably more relaxed around me. They were excited to show off their plane, and it was awfully kind of them to share so many of their stories with me. As we headed out to the runway, and despite my fat ass, the lightness of the aircraft from the lack of passengers and cargo on board was very apparent in just how bumpy it was. And for takeoff, I decided to sit in 11F, which is one of the 4 backwards facing seats on this plane. That is if you don't count the crew seats. Once again, due to the lack of mass of this plane, the takeoff was alarmingly aggressive. Now, I have been in a number of backwards facing seats on planes before, but only on wide-body jets, so this was a new experience, though I can't say that I'm a huge fan of being partially suspended by the seatbelt. The views were good though. As we leveled off, I checked out the Wi-Fi situation. It's the same GoGo in-flight service as the rest of the Air Canada fleet, so I won't go into it as I have already done so in about half a dozen other videos. However, I will mention that on this flight, the speeds were incredible, although no surprise there since I was probably the only person using it. With that in mind, I decided to use this opportunity to answer some emails and in the process check out the table. First off, when the flaps are extended, and no pun intended, it is huge, easily the size of a 4-person dining table. However, the attachments are a little floppy, so if you're on your laptop, it doesn't quite balance very well. So then if you are a gentleman or gentlewoman of business, then this can become very annoying very quickly, and thus it's a point off there. And staying on the subject of business, this arrangement does provide a unique opportunity not otherwise found on many commercial airliners, and that is the ability to have a face-to-face conversation with someone, or in my case, an argument with myself.
Hey. Oi, fuckface. What? Who are you calling a fuckface? Me? Who do you think? Of course. Why do you have to go insulting people like that? Do you not realize that people actually get upset with this shit? Stupid? You know what? When you go off and try to be funny, but instead it just turns out to be really rude and offensive. Hey, are you even listening to me? What the hell is even wrong with you? God, I can't stand being the same person as you.
Later on, I needed to go to the bathroom, and that's when I realized that in order to get out of the seat, one needs to lift the partition of the table, which can be a palava, especially if there's anything on it. The bathroom is nothing special. It is exactly what you would find on one of these regular old school Airbuses. True to the manufacturer, you'll also find a air nozzle in here, and this old school tap, which for some reason I found interesting enough to film. While I was back here, I also had a quick peek at the galley. Not that there was much to look at back here. You'd normally get a plated snack on these short flights, but these are lockdown times, and that means no food or drink service. The rest of the flight went by in a level of peace and quiet I've never experienced on an airplane before. I answered my emails and spent the remainder of the time taking advantage of the abundant natural light and lack of distractions by doing some reading.
For travel plans this morning. We certainly hope you've had a pleasant short flight with us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you, and have a good day to all.
Thank you very much, Silent. Merci beaucoup. Ouais, c'était pas le fun, mais ça fait bien, ouais, c'est ça.
Alright, let's quickly do this because I do need to get going soon. And this is not my hotel room, this is someone else's. I'm going home to Toronto tonight. Anyways, Air Canada Jetz. What do I think about it? Well, it's not a private jet like some people say it is, because your typical private jet is a lot smaller and nicer than that plane. And when I say nicer, I mean like the cabin interiors, because it is getting on quite a bit, let's be frank about that. But it was definitely a cool experience and something I'm not going to forget anytime soon. And I think it has its unique place in charters because it's meant to accommodate a lot of people relative for a private charter and a decent amount of comfort, and all the logistics is taken care of from a parent airline, and that has its benefits. But none of that is to discount the experience. It was definitely special and I enjoyed it a lot, mostly because all the other passengers were in the front and I had the rear 3/4 of the plane to myself. I wouldn't say it was a quiet experience because the engines were right there and they're kind of loud, but I would say it was very tranquil. Had it been a longer flight than an hour and 10 minutes, definitely would have enjoyed it a lot more. Could have gotten a lot of work done. I felt like I was sitting alone in a big house rather than an airplane. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. It was kind of short but sweet, hopefully. And until the next time, there's construction going on outside. Anyways, until the next time, safe travels. This is usually when the round thing goes out and the text comes. Okay, there you go.